You may have noticed during episode 2, Anakin seems to have gone through some pretty drastic changes over the last 10 years. Big changes we don't have the chance to see in the films. So, what happened? How'd he go from a sweet, generous boy to this?
Tell us now!
And this.
He never listens. He doesn't understand. It's not fair.
And this.
Taking him now! No, Anakin, no!
Was it all random so he could become a bad guy? There wasn't really any setup for this in episode 1. Or was there? Starting at the beginning, we see that despite being a slave, Anakin was a giving, good-natured child who was always able to make the most of what he had. We also see that besides being gifted in the Force, Anakin was basically like most other kids. He had lofty ambitions.
I want to be the first one to see them all.
A strong sense of identity.
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
A little pride in his accomplishments.
I built a racer. It's the fastest ever. I'm the only human who can do it.
He's impatient and wants quick solutions.
What are we gonna do about it?
He dreamt of becoming a Jedi, which came true. He believed that Jedi could do whatever they want.
Have you come to free us?
And he even believed that Jedi are invincible.
No one can kill a Jedi.
In other words, death can be prevented if you're powerful enough. And of course, he also had a strong bond with his mother, a natural attachment that all children have with their primary caregivers. His mom was his stable, loving center amidst the unpredictability of their slave's life. And as a slave, he lived under the constant possibility that this sense of stability could suddenly be taken away on a slave owner's whim, separating him and his mother at any time, all while feeling powerless to keep potential devastating changes and loss from happening in his life. His owner also forbid him from certain activities, some of which happened to be his passion, like building pod racers. But Anakin, being who he is, built one anyway, in secret. Later, when he meets Qui-Gon and Padmé and learns of their predicament, he wants to help them by racing his pod, despite knowing his mother wouldn't want him to. But after she agrees, he uses his secret racer and his special abilities to help them continue their mission to save Naboo, and ended up also winning his freedom. And along the way, he developed a friendship with Padmé. And Anakin, being who he is, gives her a Japor snippet to remember him by and to bring her good fortune. So, if we haven't caught it by now, he has a big heart and a protector instinct. In turn, Padmé promises to watch after him when they reach the big old bustling planet Coruscant, making him feel comforted and cared for. And while the Jedi Council decide Anakin is not allowed to be trained because of his age and subsequent attachments, Qui-Gon does promise him he'll take him under his wing. They quickly find themselves in the Battle of Naboo, where Anakin is told to remain safely seated inside a dormant starfighter. And, of course, intent on helping his friends, Anakin fires the Starcraft's guns at their enemies, and the ship then takes off towards the battle in space.
There they are.
Still preferring to help out, Anakin justifies his risky behavior by stating that he's supposed to remain in that seat. And of course, he ends up saving the day.
Now this is pod racing.
So when the Jedi confirm the return of the Sith, they make an exception for the greater good and decide to induct Anakin into the Order in the hopes he is indeed the chosen one, who will someday restore balance to the Force and save the galaxy. However, there is one small problem. The Jedi don't really know how to go about a more tailored kind of training for someone who has grown up with their family. So they stick with their traditional form of training. Anakin learning to let go of his family bonds is something he'll need to process through. But as a consequence of the necessity of their upbringing, the Jedi don't quite know how to directly relate to him. And his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who'd made a dying promise to Qui-Gon to train Anakin, though well-meaning, may be a bit too young and by the book to be the kind of effective mentor and father figure Anakin greatly needs. However, Anakin does find an older, more consoling mentor. Having helped save his planet, the genteel senator from Naboo, who had been elected as the new Chancellor of the Republic, takes an interest in following Anakin's career and soon becomes a trusted confidant. More of a friend than an authority figure. Now, of course, all of these traits of Anakin's mentioned so far are natural, healthy traits for a growing child. But now there's another small problem. Unbeknownst to the galaxy, Palpatine is actually the Dark Lord of the Sith. And in the hands of a master manipulator, Anakin's more innocent traits could be molded and shaped into a sense of self-righteousness and entitlement. Palpatine offers to Anakin quick and easy advice for his life's challenges, rather than the hard work and personal growth demanded by his Jedi training. He tells Anakin what he wants to hear instead of what he needs to. Palpatine deftly persuades Anakin to pursue his own personal goals, even if they go against that darn stifling Jedi way. Yep, he uses Anakin's innate gifts, personal strengths, ambitions, and special status to see his potential power as something with which to indulge his deepest wishes, and gradually warps them into self-serving desires. And like with everyone else, flipping his strengths into liabilities, so that his natural drives will play right into Palpatine's hands. And those emotions? Why learn to regulate them when they fuel your power? And those personal bonds with loved ones? Why train to let go of them when it's only natural? In other words, why not have the best of both the Jedi and the regular person worlds? And who was most dear to Anakin's world? Yep, his mom. And what was his biggest goal? Well, when Anakin's opportunity came to leave home and become a Jedi, the only motivation and justification he could give himself to actually leave his mother was to promise to someday come back and free her. And although it was a promise made out of a passion for protecting loved ones, it was a naive one. But all the same, never being able to fulfill this important and sentimental promise weighed heavy on his heart as the years went by, and the guilt kept building up, as well as, of course, the frustration. Entering cold turkey into the Jedi way during such a vulnerable stage in his development while he was still emotionally dependent on his mother forced him to grow up too fast before developing into an independent person. And he was reluctant to train himself to let go of his attachment to his mother for fear that that would lead to him reneging on his promise to free her. And there was one other person Anakin was never able to stop thinking about. Yeah, that nice, cool chick, Padmé. Who wouldn't think about that heartwarming, reassuring smile every day? And it seems the more he was required to forego his tendency for binding personal connections, the more he doubled down on his fascination with Padmé. For him, she was a source of comfort, consolation, and inspiration, then gradually as a muse, and when he hit puberty, a would-be partner. He just couldn't eradicate the part of himself that longed for regular people, family connection. In fact, you could say it was the part of the good that was always within him. But he's also dedicated to his path of becoming a Jedi. And not being allowed to walk both of these paths together sort of created a split in his psyche and caused him a lot of anxiety and melancholia. But it was his responsibility to pick one, because the Jedi life requires the deepest commitment, and it's hard to be committed to prioritizing the greater good of the galaxy and one's family at the same time. Bottom line is, Anakin did not have the things he wanted, which brought on his own suffering. As Krishnamurti said in the Young Indiana Jones series,
You see, people want things they cannot have, and that makes them sad, and they suffer.
and to distract himself from all these difficult and tumultuous emotions, he took to thrill-seeking. Yeah, he's a naturally skilled pilot, but this reckless risk-taking is enough to exasperate Obi-Wan, and shows Anakin's propensity to stray outside the prescribed Jedi norms to accomplish his goals. And although Anakin is rough around the edges and behind the curve with his non-attachment, he of course exhibits exceptional skills in many other areas, leading to a surge in arrogance. But along with that, in Anakin's other changing attitudes, even when Kenobi does express his concerns, the Jedi take a permissive stance. First, these aren't really all that atypical phases for a teenager, making it easier to tolerate and pardon. And second, with him being a Jedi, and tentatively the chosen one at that, they had a default faith in him to eventually mature and adhere to the Jedi way, and do the right things when the time comes. They figured it was just a foregone conclusion. In this regard, their glasses may have been too rose-colored, and they were not aware of Palpatine's dark influence over him. And as far as possibly being the chosen one, Anakin didn't really like to talk about it much, mainly because he didn't really know all of what fulfilling this prophecy would entail. I think he was worried that accomplishing this feat might mean he would have to forego his connections with his family, and that's something he can't do. So, in being torn between prioritizing his loved ones and saving the universe, well, that's just a burdensome dilemma he just tries not to think about.
And I think she's a changeling.
So, with all of Anakin's surroundings and influences, the angels and the devils on his shoulders, and his choices therein, it's no wonder by episode 2 we see Anakin doing things like thinking the Jedi limit themselves too much and feeling held back from doing what he feels is right to help people,
Is implied in our mandate.
fudging with the semantics of the word love to manufacture loopholes with which to justify his pursuit of a romantic relationship,
So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
engaging in death-defying stunts to save Padmé, and while running on his passions, losing his temper when the suspects don't cooperate,
Tell us now!
finding loopholes with Padmé to save Obi-Wan while still basically obeying his mandate,
You'll just have to come along.
feeling justified in not only marrying Padmé, but also in keeping it a secret. And we do see Chancellor Palpatine feeding Anakin's ego, getting him to think he can become the most powerful Jedi ever. And for a youngster with unprecedented potential and lofty ambitions, it's hard to ignore. And now we've got a recipe for disaster. So, as we can see, over the last 10 years, Anakin has been struggling with issues of dissatisfaction, resentment, and his attachments have only grown rather than subsided.
I don't like sand.
He's a regular person wanting to be a Jedi and thus conflicted between the two worlds. Or more specifically, he wants the best of both. He wants to cling to his attachments, but he's unwilling and unable to deal with the pain and fear that can come with that. So when he starts having troubling dreams of his mother in danger, his worst fears are triggered. But his Jedi responsibilities prevent him from attending to the situation. He therefore avoids his uncomfortable feelings by distracting himself with his fixation on Padmé all the more.
I'd much rather dream about Padme.
Your presence is soothing.
Padmé eventually helps him find a loophole with which he can go rescue his mom while still technically obeying his mandate. But when faced with the devastating loss of his mother, all that bottled up frustration, guilt, and festering fears and anxieties come erupting out in the form of his hate and anguish. And to numb the burning pain, he decides then and there on the spur of the moment to avenge his mother's death by killing the Tuskens, essentially blaming them for the cause of his pain. And reacting on these destructive, negative emotions gave him a taste of the power surge the dark side could give him in that moment. And justifying the retaliation as their comeuppance reinforces his self-righteousness and rage, which begins to open the floodgates within him for a deeper craving for even more dark power. Here, he gets the notion to find the ultimate power to fix things and eliminate any possible threats to his loved ones and his clinging attachments to them. The power to stop loss from ever happening again. The power to stop death. Which is why he keeps going, thinking he's almost there. If he just keeps going, he can have what he wants, until he finds he has slaughtered the entire Tusken camp. He thinks this ability is possible because his natural ambitious drives have been slowly corrupted into a greedy resolve, and a longing for control. And being that Anakin's biggest passion in life is protecting his loved ones, he's been steered into seeing this as the ultimate way to protect them, and to protect himself from the pain of losing them. And this is when he vows to himself, to Padme, and upon his mother's grave, to find this unnatural power. And when he later has a dream of Padme dying, his quest snowballs until he finally becomes obsessed with finding this power.
Save people from death.
Now enslaved to his own selfish cravings.
And I know I shouldn't.
Which brings him to the precipice of his fall. You see, when Lucas started making the prequels, he wanted the story of Anakin's fall to be a depiction of how a good and normal person goes bad. It's not about a bad seed doing evil and craving power simply for its own sake. It's about how everyone is capable of good and bad, depending on the choices we make, which determines the balance within ourselves. And how these choices we make, whether selfish or selfless, also affect those around us. Anakin's turn is a human story we can empathize with, in which his descent towards the dark side begins with love and a drive to do right. But through his impressionability, his propensity towards connection was corrupted into possession. But in the end, he finally learns self-sacrifice and is redeemed by love, and saves the universe while protecting his loved ones.
Hey, she's my mom. I gotta help her.
Thanks so much for watching.